Welcome to the Industrial Edge podcast with me, Joe Haggis. In this podcast, we sit down with a broad range of professionals who are involved in a wide range of industrial settings. From maintenance and reliability professionals, facility managers, engineers, through to operations and production leaders, consultants, and business owners who support all things that keep the modern world we live in safe, productive, and efficient. We discuss the unique stories our guests have been on personally, while getting into some of the deeper details, challenges, and opportunities that face them in their particular industries and areas of specialisation. I hope you enjoy the conversation. Welcome, Adam. We've got Adam Lea-Bischinger here. Adam, thanks for coming on, first of all. It's a pleasure to have you on the podcast. The first question I've got for you is, can you explain asset management to me like I'm a 5-year-old, but as if I have no clue about it? From your perspective, what is asset management?
Sure. But yeah, thanks, Joe, for inviting me on. It's a good one. It's really, the classic elevator pitch, or you meet someone at a dinner party, traveling around the world. I think usually when someone asks, what do you do? And you say asset management, they think you're a financial guy. I usually say it's physical asset management, so it sounds a bit more like stuff. But I usually kind of hit them just with the headline. It's a bit cliche, but we deliver value. But no, maybe more along the line of we keep the modern world running, and then people pique up their interest, going, "Oh, what is that?" But yeah, just I'd say, look, you probably used roads, rails, airports, power stations. You probably flushed the toilet this morning. All of that is assets and infrastructure. And the ultimate goal of asset management is keeping it operational, which again probably leads people into thinking it's more maintenance rather than this, deliver value to stakeholders, which I think a lot of people get confused with. But again, back to your questions. What do I see it is? Yeah, it is an organizational methodology. It's trying to create that line of sight between what the management or the business is trying to achieve and what's happening day to day. And again, given the current climate with many things happening around the world, they all have an impact on organizations. So again, if I was to summarize it, it's putting in place a organizational structure to ensure that the assets function, that again you're getting value from them, and you're balancing risks and costs over the life cycle.
Yeah, brilliant. No, really well said and put. I think again for me, it's always that end to end, right? From the start all the way through to its, from cradles to grave, as many people maybe sort of word it as. But yeah, and like you mentioned, right, making sure you're getting value out of your assets, right? You're using them to the full potential, etc. And you're also balancing the risks that come into it. And it's not just, like you say, it's not just maintenance is an element of asset management, right? It's a part of asset management, but it's a niche within it, should we say? Okay, good. Asset management as a whole, do you think it's a misunderstood? Do you think it's a misunderstood practice as a whole? You mentioned there, you speak to people and you mention asset management and they go straight away, think financial. Do you think it's a misunderstood function as a whole? What are your thoughts on that?
I would say yes.
Okay.
Simple answer. No. Again, I guess it comes down to, again, is a company trying to get their asset management certificate, so ISO certified, a little bit like the 9000, 1445 that people know about, or are they genuinely interested in improving the asset operations or whatever? And yeah, there is a misconception there, because a lot of people, I say, some organizations are driven to get the certificate on the wall, whereas others want to manage their assets better. But again, I think there's a difference in understanding or terminology within an organization. If you go up to the senior levels, they might see asset management as more of kind of compliance, regulatory, risk management piece. And then as you come down to the operations team, they're thinking more around the maintenance, the reliability and spare parts. But again, as you know, there's a lot of more things involved, from documentation, data, skills, competencies. So yeah, I think having a common language, common understanding helps. But yeah, awareness improving. It's been 10 years since the publication of the ISO standard. Obviously, there was past 55 before that. A lot of chat in conferences. I've seen a few maintenance and reliability conferences kind of pivot to throw in the word asset management. But yeah, still misunderstood. I think, again, few companies have got the certificate on the wall, but haven't always seen the true value that it's delivered. Yeah, still a bit of work to do on that.
Yeah, good. I especially like the point you mentioned. It depends on the lens, right? Where you sit in the organization, the executive lens, or someone more in the operation, like you say, maybe a middle manager. Depends on maybe even how you view asset management and what it means to you. So maybe that kind of forms part of that misunderstanding or perception of it. It means different things to different people, of course, which is a good way of putting it. Yeah, I really like your take on that. Good.
I think also just to add to that, if you look at the state of asset management around the world, if you look at countries like Australia, New Zealand, Canada, they've really interwoven it into their kind of federal funding. So I think there's a better understanding there on a kind of federal governmental level and the organizations within that country. So very much, you're not going to get the funding from us unless you are showing the certificate or alignment to asset management. So I think that's encouraging dialogue. But again, we can't, like asset management, we can't work in a silo and then treat it completely different around the world. So I think there's a lot of good learnings from our friends in Canada or Australia and the dialogue and raising that within, America, Europe, and the rest of the world.
No, it's a really interesting view, right? And I've never really thought of it of how it's viewed globally as well, right? But like you say, when countries embed it within their federal funding and budgetary requirements, should we say, and make it as part of that, that only supports it even further, right? And again, there is, like you say, I work in an organization that works in a lot of these larger contracts that embed asset management within them, and that is a requirement of them. So, yeah, you're absolutely right. No, good, Adam. Talk to about your spent some time in Shell around, in maintenance, asset integrity as well. Your first sort of 10, 15 years. What did that teach you at those early years in your career about managing assets?
That's a good one. Yeah, I mean, so I studied materials and corrosion at university. Had a really good lecturer, taught us corrosion. Actually, made it very interesting. I really, really liked it. To think that I think he quoted something like 3% of GDP is spent on managing corrosion, and I was
Yeah,
like,
wow.
that's an industry I could get into.
I think a ship straight away with corrosion for some reason.
Just
any
everything.
Infrastructure. Yeah, you're
exactly. Right. So then I worked for Shell whilst at university. So I did a placement and really enjoyed that. That opened my eyes into application of what we learned. Then after that, I started an engineering doctorate with Imperial College. That was actually on inspection. So I kind of looked at how things corrode and then started doing some research on how to inspect and detect the corrosion. But yeah, I think, Shell, when I, started as a graduate, I think within the first month or two, we actually had 2 fatalities. So that was a really, eye opener that poor management of asset, corrosions, whatever, it kills people. So that's always stayed with me. And, kind of looking back, I kind of say it's almost like a spreadsheet that killed them. Because unfortunately the what was a damage to a piece of equipment was called a temporary repair, and it had been sitting on an Excel spreadsheet and not been properly managed, and it leaked, and the people died. So, yeah, that was, I didn't realize it until I kind of look back, but this end-to-end risk, data, decisions, maintenance, that they're all linked. But no, Shell's a very good, company, operates differently around the world, from Australia, Nigeria, America. They're all assets, but very different organizational cultures. Taught me a lot about, engineering standards. That was really interesting. But again, I was fortunate enough to work on a new build project called GoldenEye, which I thought was pretty cool because
nice.
It was just after the Bond movie. And it was like satellite controlled. It was an unmanned platform. And at its peak, it actually delivered 5% of the UK gas demand, which was pretty interesting. But yeah, that early journey kind of introduced me to the whole world of, like, say, data and drawings in the design build, handover to operations, setting up all of your systems, your databases, your risk-based inspection software, and then managing it. And again, competency and training of people. You've built this new asset, but have you trained people to use it properly? There was decisions at the design phase, again, the classic CapEx, OpEx that I learned later. My boss at the time, fought for a paint system that would last 20 years versus the kind of classic 5 years, but it was 5 times more expensive or whatever. But he got that, and it meant that we didn't have to actually go in and paint it, over the years. So again, really learning in those days, lifecycle kind of cost analysis. So that was, really interesting. I had great colleagues, still in contact with them, just, very knowledgeable. But again, taught me that we've siloed disciplines, data, teams, all trying to manage the same asset. So that's kind of lived with me. And actually, every company that I've worked with and for over my career, it's the same story,
Yeah, good reflections, Adam. I think siloing functions, I think, is always a challenge. Something I always think about is like how you either centralize or do you decentralize functions, and what that looks like and who reports to who, and that creates a big difference in your organization, etc. So and that comes back to exactly what you mentioned, right, around decisions as well, right? Decisions in engineering, making the right decisions. So no, really good reflections, and interesting about the corrosion piece, right? 3% of GDP. That is
I think
it's an
still
interesting stat.
stands.
Yeah, it's an interesting stat. Very interesting. But when you think about it, right, like you say, it impacts absolutely everything within the infrastructure and asset management world. Should we say? No, good.
I always say, Mother Nature wants it back. We
Correct.
put
It's just reverting it to a natural state, right?
We put all that energy into producing steel and getting it out from the oxide, and then we've got this nice steel beam, and then Mother Nature says, "I want it back."
Yeah, it's absolutely the right way of looking at it. I completely agree, and it'll take it back if you let it. Moving into, I suppose, the last 10 years, right? You've been consulting. You work for an organization. Sorry, Adam. You work for an organization. Do you work for yourself? What's that? What's that structure look like? First of all, I probably should have understood that before I joined. I'll say that at the outset.
So I work for myself.
Nice.
Set up my company about 11 years ago now.
Brilliant.
It was, I worked for operators, and then worked for some engineering consultancies. Then I worked for some, EPC contractors. onshore and offshore. I really kind of steered my career. I was fascinated just by the whole supply chain from, someone like Shell saying we need an oil platform or a refinery to the construction companies that would, build it for them, EPC, engineering, procurement, and to then, like I say, the whole supply chain down to, equipment suppliers that would bid. And so, yeah, my career followed the supply chain from consulting to equipment. And then, like I say, really enjoyed consulting because you can kind of take the same methodologies into different industries. And then just thought, hey, I need a desk and a computer, so I'll go it alone. And also with ups and downs of the oil price, the industry kind of sheds some people, people go into retirement. And I just thought as a buffer to this commodity swing, let's take this knowledge of corrosion, integrity, maintenance, asset management into other industries. So yeah, worked in railway, worked in power generation, water, airports, pharmaceuticals. So really blessed and fortunate, and also meet other amazing people, some people that you've already had on your podcast.
Nice.
Yeah, so it's a great community of independents, and like I say, we help each other on projects. But again, similar projects. My wife always says, like, what do you know about this and that? On why are you going to this country? But again, the themes that we've talked around, people, competency, data, risk, supply chain, it's they're all the same building blocks or the elements. The context is just different of where the organization's operating.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm sure you would. And I think I read. You always say this. I'm always snooping on LinkedIn profiles. It's the best way to do some understanding about a guest. But I think you've had some interesting clients, especially out in the Middle East, right? And I think obviously what's going on in the world right now is obviously plays a big part around asset management in terms of infrastructure and the discussions around infrastructure and the destruction of it, even maybe at the moment in the current state of the world, unfortunately.
Yeah.
But have you worked with? I'm assuming you worked with some pretty interesting clients out in the Middle East, and and as you mentioned, it's interesting being in a commodity-based industry. That is something that's really facing some demand at the moment in that space, especially in oil and gas, in the current situation we find ourselves in, which is interesting.
Yeah.
No, good.
No, just to expand on that. I mean, I was fortunate enough. I was actually working on a project in Qatar, actually for a gas to liquids operator. Very, very interesting technology as well. And then I got a phone call and said, someone said, "Hey, can you help the metro with their asset management?" And I was like, "Yeah, sure. I'm actually in country." And it was just before the World Cup, and it was the most critical infrastructure to deliver that World Cup of moving nearly 1 million people a day. And again, we think oil and gas are big projects at 5-10 billion, but the metro I think was about 34 billion. Yeah. And again, help them deliver the World Cup. It'd never been done in just one city, and you could actually go and watch about 3 football matches a day and just run up and down the metro. But yeah, fortunate enough to, like I say, work with really interesting companies there, from oil operators to big infrastructure. And again, there's different cyclic natures. There's a huge build out in the Middle East at the moment because they're trying to pivot their industry away from oil and gas. So a lot of tourism. I'm sure many of the listeners have flown through Dubai or Qatar or Abu Dhabi as these flight hubs. A good colleague of mine, he's working at Riyadh Airport, and they're trying to replicate the success. Bring tourists in. So whilst we've got aging infrastructure in Europe and North America, there's a huge $1 trillion build out in the Middle East. So again, try not to replicate some of the errors that we made in the past.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, like you say, those hubs, certainly been through them myself, and you think I always am in awe of the infrastructure that they're in those, whether it's Doha or if it's Dubai, Abu Dhabi, wherever that may be. And it's impressive, right? The infrastructure that exists, and really interesting, like you say, around working in different industries, like you say, metro, oil and gas. Ultimately, the principles of asset management remain the same, right? It's just the context, like you say, changes each time. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, again, I think the ISO standard's a good place to start because ISO is well recognized, well established from things like the 9000 for quality, 45. But as I always say to people and stress, it's not really a legal requirement. It might be a contractual requirement, but having a safety management system doesn't get you a get out of jail card if you hurt someone. So I think it's good. It's got those nice building blocks around the leadership commitment and data, but of course it fails to tell you how to do it and what the priority is, what the risk and what the actual money element is. But yeah, like I say, the framework of people, processes, risks, data, that they are the same. But as you said, the context change, whether it's a airport in Dubai with a couple of 100 million people a year, or a water treatment plant, or a power station. Having that kind of structure and experience in here, and with some good supporting documents and standards, you can go into an organization and quickly get a measure of where they're at and where some of the pain points are.
Yeah, nice. Yeah, good. You touched on an interesting point there around the standards that they don't tell you how to really implement them, should we say? Now, I'm certainly not an asset management expert, but looking at the asset management standards, right? You got 55,000, 55,001, 55,002. Is 55,002 not the one that is kind of explaining how to do it, or is that not correct? And how I'm explaining that?
No, you're right. Yeah.
But in reality, is it a different? Is there a complete disconnect there of like how it actually, like you say, because of the issues not issues, but because of the topics you raise around risk, context, organizational factors, is that cookie cutter kind of approach? Does it not work in reality?
Again, you're right. Just for people if they're not aware who are listening, the 50,000 is more the kind of nomenclature and terminology. I always kind of just say it's a bit like a dictionary. The 55,001 is the actual requirements, is what the organization would get their certificate against. And again, this is the certificate is not for the company or individuals, it's actually the management system. And then the 55,002, as you said, is the how to kind of implement it. But again, it's not going to tell you to buy this database or do these things. And with my work, I like the saying, don't innovate, imitate, which obviously someone had to innovate. But there's a lot of good, industry bodies, and as I said, around Canada, Australia, New Zealand, a lot of municipalities and organizations have published good examples of strategic asset management plans and other competency management frameworks. So, don't start with a blank piece of paper. You can imitate or use that as a kind of structure. So, yeah, again, with my work, I kind of look far and wide to see who's done what, and I've kind of built up my own database repository of here's a good strategic asset management plan from an airport in the UK or an airport in America or water treatment plant in Middle East. And so you can kind of lift and shift some of the framework, but of course you've got to, write and tailor it to the country, the local laws and regulations. But again, I think, one of the biggest challenges, I kind of say, asset management is not about the documents. It's nice, but again, it's the implementation of it. And ultimately, it's about the culture and the leadership that's going to drive that home. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's great having the standards there, which is better than some sort of functions within a business, but without actually, like you say, without actually applying them and them being embedded, understood, people that are advocates, champions of it, right? To really explain the benefit of adopting them, and to demonstrate the value of it, right? Going back to what you said at the start, like showing where the value is from asset management. It's just another standard, right? In regards of it's an ISO standard, and they are what they are without people humans breathing life into them right at the end of the day. So no, brilliant. Talk to me, Adam, a little bit about your involvement with the Institute of Asset Management. You mentioned as well, 10 years since the ISO standards have been in place. I know there's the PAS ones, I believe, that were in place before that. But how do you think the institutes such as Institute of Asset Management? I know even in Australia we use Institute of Asset Management as a good. I always think of the what is it? You're gonna have to help me out here. There's like this really good video, but there's also this kind of ecology of
Big picture journey.
yeah, the big picture. We've got that as a big poster up in one of the offices at where I work, and I always think the Institute of Asset Management have done some really good work on that, and it's used elsewhere.
Yeah.
How do you think institutes such as that? We have there's currently a conference in Australia at the minute, Asset Management Council. A few people I've had on have been part of that. How do you think those institutes help the industry over the years, or how do they contribute to the ISO standards, and what does that look like, and what's your involvement been with that? Sorry, quite a big question.
No, it's all good. No, so my involvement started back probably about 2011, 2012, when I actually just joined as a member. I think the body of knowledge, I don't think someone will correct me, but the exams were either just in their infancies and things. It's evolved as an institute. I set up the Aberdeen branch for the institute because it kind of blew my mind that massive infrastructure in the North Sea, and there wasn't a local branch. There was one in Glasgow, but I kind of said no one's traveling 150 miles in the evening. And unfortunately, just as we kind of started doing some joint presentations with the Energy Institute, the Institute of Mechanical Engineers, COVID came along and it kind of knocked the wind out of the sail. But again, as many listeners know, it's an interesting relationship because you've also got this global forum on maintenance and asset management who kind of come up with these 40 subjects. And then the Institute of Asset Management is leading the SSG development, where they're writing more context around those subjects. And then, as you said, you've got the Asset Management Council, you've got PMAC over in Canada, you've got SAMA in South Africa, you've got the SMRP in America. So many are members of GFMAM. Then there's kind of friendly rivalry between countries, regions, and institutes. But again, I think they're all moving in the right direction, trying to share that knowledge, build on that body of knowledge. And actually, last month I was very fortunate to become a fellow of the Institute of Asset Management, and very active in bringing on the next generation. So I do some lecturing at universities. Just finished a master's lecture at Loughborough University, who've been offering infrastructure asset management. And again, for me, working with institutions, universities, the next generation of engineers, and again, asset management isn't just engineering. I've met some great people who are psychologists and biologists and economists and other ists, but you need different perspectives. But no, I think overall the IAM very good with the, like I say, branches in different regions, and again the kind of overlap, collaboration, and not combat, but interactions with other regions and institutes is good, beneficial.
Yeah, good. good. And I like that you mentioned, kind of that healthy rivalry almost. But again, at the same time, I'm sure those institutes aren't shy in sort of sharing best practice between each other and using those examples, like you said before, around, if someone's doing something well, whether it be an airport, let's say, for example, then using that as a good case study, a good example. So you're not, to your point before around imitate, don't innovate. You don't always have to start from scratch and try and do something completely original. You can use some best practice. It's certainly it's a wise move to do that, and you can do a lot of the heavy lifting's already been done there. So yeah, brilliant. I've got a question here, Adam. Maybe we've already covered it. I put around best practice and how you support organizations with asset management in your consulting role.
So yeah, regarding best practice, I think again it's not a bone of contention, because there is no one gold standard. There are activities that are good, and best is always getting better. The classic, a lot of what I would do is the kind of benchmark or the assessment. We try not to call it an audit because A, people don't like audits, and B, if it's not really a certification audit, we're really just saying, this is what you're doing well, and here's some things that you can improve. And again, most companies know this, and it's in the nature of the beast that sometimes you need an external person to come along and tell them what they already knew and put it into a nice presentation. But yeah, again, best practice. Yeah, there's certainly a lot of great frameworks, methodologies, standards. And again, you can really go down a rabbit hole of the semantics of what's a strategy, what's a framework, what's a best practice, what's a guideline, what's a regulation, and all those things. But again, if I want to make a statement, and I'm happy to be challenged on this, if we didn't invent any new technology or processes or frameworks, and we just implemented what we had now, the world would be a very different place. we would certainly, like I say, we've got all the cost models and all the data and things. We just need to act upon it. That's really, I think, one of the big takeaways from this would be, it's already been solved somewhere. You just need to lift, shift, apply, enforce, and improve. That's really it.
Yeah, nice. No, I think it's a good view to have, right? We're always trying to optimize and not reinvent the wheel, maybe, but always trying to optimize, etc., and innovate. But there's a lot of good practice out there. If we just actually spent more time applying it as opposed to trying to, optimize, then yeah, we'd be in a good place. So yeah, I think it's a good take. But maybe someone will challenge you out there and say, oh, well, we've got to keep innovating and moving forward. And I'm sure you believe that as well. But I completely agree with you with what you're saying.
Happy to be challenged and keep that dialogue going. But again, when you think of our ancestors who have managed to keep, the London sewerage network that's 150 years old going, the Eiffel Tower has been painted enough times. We've got the Iron Bridge in the UK. We've got Golden Gate Bridge. We've got assets that are multiple centuries. I mean, when I've taught at university, I've even shown aqueducts from the Romans, and they didn't have a maintenance management system or a strategy. And they've kept it going for a couple of millennia. So, yeah, I think we've got most of the tools we need. We need to, really the role of an asset manager is to be that person that kind of spins the plates and embeds it into the organization. They can't do everything, but they can coordinate and oversee and keep the process going,
Yeah, absolutely. No, good reflections. I like like you say, around the aqueducts, shocking the Romans weren't using 55,000, but they've done a pretty good job. And the Greeks. What do you think is the biggest opportunities for organizations within asset management? What's the kind of lowest of the low hanging fruit that you often see in organizations that you go in? Or is it less that, and is it more, you mentioned a lot of organizations already know what they need to be doing, or what good looks like, shall we say, and you just need maybe sometimes someone independent to come and give them the thumbs up and a nice presentation, like you say. What are the biggest opportunities, or what are the biggest opportunities for organisations with asset management?
Now, again, there's a good quote saying, I don't know who it's attributed to, but bad people with good systems will not get the output that you want, but good people with bad systems will find a way around it. So, a good friend of mine says people do asset management, and they're right. So often just encouraging the people that are already in there can make a big change, which again kind of comes back to the leadership, but training and competency. And when people are all working in their own little teams and departments, I'm in finance. I remember going and seeing one organization. I went to speak to HR, and they said, why are you talking to me? I'm HR. What's that got to do with asset management? And by the time I'd explained the human side, they understood it. But yeah, I think what's the kind of low-hanging fruit, cheap option, bit of training, awareness of for personnel of what asset management is. And if you frame it in as much as the job you do is really, really valuable, and it's a part of a bigger process of keeping the assets going, keeping people safe, keeping society ticking along, I think people feel good. So, whilst some might say, let's roll out a new maintenance management system or risk framework, valuable, but empower the people, and they should do the right things to start to improve the system. And a bit of ownership. Again, the kind of people, culture, leadership, communication piece, crack that, all the systems become subservient to you, and things really improve. I've seen companies with really shiny, expensive dashboards, but the people are not engaged, and you're not seeing it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. You can have all the tools in the world, right? But all the dashboards, it feels like many dashboards in many companies now that are just. It'd be interesting to see, actually. Maybe a metric is how many people have been into some of those dashboards that we have housed on our servers these days. So anyway, I digress.
KPI.
Yeah. Adam, going into some of the industry challenges, barriers, maybe some of the tensions as well. What's a view you hold regarding asset management that is most challenging for your peers or others in the profession? Maybe it's a question I've got for you.
I think again it comes back to what I was saying, that it's already been done. And again, I know that well, you did ask for something controversial, but it really has. I mean, almost again, and this is the challenge to the listeners, pick the industry you're in, or pick any industry, and go and pick 5 or 10 countries. Go and do a little bit of research on what those organizations are doing for asset management and what can you find on the web. And I would say someone somewhere has written the process or the document or the strategy or the guideline for what you need. And it just needs to be tweaked to your organization and regulations and everything, and then just embedded. We're really not at frontier science. We're not quantum computing. Where again, I'm sure many of your listeners know how many companies are literally held up by Excel spreadsheets, or what's in Dave said, someone's. But the paperwork trail has been done, right? The kind of table of contents, write it for your organization, but again, embed it, enforce it, empower people to use it, improve it, and update it. And yeah, so what's the contrary view? It's already been done. You're not doing anything new. You've just got some organizational or local challenges that need to be overcome.
Nice. And do you think that's the biggest challenge though, is more around the, or do you think a lot of people within asset management spend too much time in that kind of the space of writing the plans, et cetera, as opposed to actually executing and getting stuck into them and applying them? Do you think that's one of the biggest challenges? From
A little
trying to
bit.
understand your take.
Yeah, and again, I don't want to oversimplify things because things can get complicated quite quickly. And like say, in the planning execution, but you can also, I love quotes, and I do believe
it's turning quite stoic, this podcast, I must say. I like it.
But the one that I believe it's attributed to Mike Tyson, and it says everyone's got a plan until they get punched in the face.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and it's true. Everyone's got a business continuity strategy document, and then there's a war or COVID comes along, and we forgot to add that as a chapter. So, planning's nice, but doing is better, and then you learn. But yeah, again, documents are good. And coming back to what we were talking about, dashboards and KPIs, just a couple of things on that. Most dashboards are lagging indicators, so it's happened. Again, you can have a rabbit hole conversation around leading and lagging. And again, when you present people with this information, they often, if it's green, they're happy, and if they're red, they're sad. But rarely do they know why it's green, and don't always know why it's red. And you can't run an organization. And again, I'm sure many listeners know the classic, 100% PM compliance, and then things break, or 100% safety compliance, and then I go and walk in the warehouse and I see people with no goggles or hats, safety hats and things. So, yeah, I think the paper trail part is done, but the actual implementation and testing, like I say, we're living in some pretty crazy times. Again, with what we've lived through with COVID, and there was opportunities because of people not using infrastructure to rebuild and replenish. Working from home meant more people were, using water and electricity at home rather than an office, but it also meant we were using cars less. So again, we're living in these interesting times, very complex, supply chain or multi-level systems that something over here can have an impact over here. So again, there is no perfect execution, but doing something, learning, testing is the most important part.
Yeah, nice. No, good reflections. I think it's really interesting what you mentioned there around, when you think about COVID and the impact on assets and asset management, and like you say, right, even like the transition to work from home and the stress that takes off, all the assets that people were doing when they were traveling to the office 5 days a week. And you think about that, and now home and domestic infrastructure is being used more now, and all these sorts of things you've got me thinking about. But anyway, like you say, I like that you mentioned around KPIs, right, and around, I always find it's kind of what gets incentivized kind of gets done, and they say kind of what gets measured gets managed. But the reality is, like you say, just because I always use kind of a watermelon analogy, it's kind of green on the outside and red in the middle. You just scratch the surface a little bit and actually look at, and like you say, a lot of the time it's people not actually understanding what they're measuring. Not understanding what they're measuring, and when you actually go and look into that, it's just kind of surface level compliance. It's surface level, sort of almost facade like, when till you get into it. Anyway, I digress. No, good points. Really good points, and yeah, interesting. Coming back to, you mentioned before around capex and opex, and you give a good example. Something that frustrated me in previous roles is around that kind of selling total cost of ownership, and hey, if you spend a bit more capex here, 5-10%, you'll save 20-30% opex. What do you see the biggest tensions or the biggest challenges to organizations, with that kind of in mind, to the kind of cost versus risk, or the sort of short term versus long term thinking? Do you think it's a lot of the time driven depending on the organization, if they are kind of living quarter to quarter, earnings results to earnings results, or what do you see as the biggest tension to or barrier to businesses, and why they don't maybe look at things from a kind of holistic view? And is it just because naturally, maybe a lot of the executives want to do that, but they can't because of they've not got enough cash flow, or what does that look like? Sorry, I know I'm going a bit into heavy detail there, but that kind of OPEX versus CAPEX, I suppose, is the question.
That's, again, really good question. And again, to frame it, depending where you are in the world and what sectors, it looks very different. And, again, to come back to the Middle East, not to generalize, but a lot of the infrastructure is owned by the government, road, rail, power, and they view things very differently. They, again, if people have traveled through the region, the size, the quality is vastly different. Now, again, it's a bit more modern built when you think of the aqueducts to road rail infrastructure in Europe, where Britain pretty much invented the railways. They're obviously a lot older, but the mentality, and again, back when I was working on the metro, don't quote me, but it probably lost a lot of money, but it was a key enabler to deliver the World Cup, which was quite a prestigious thing, first Arab nation to deliver it. So for them, it was like it's the prestige for their nation, and it moves people around, tourists. So there's like second, third order benefits, rather than how much does it cost to operate versus how much money do we get. So, again, back to this CapEx, OpEx, where you are in the world, keeping the lights on, keeping people moving, and there's second, third order value that comes from that. Now, I'm not going to bash accountants, but they could. The classic one is always, how come an asset after 5 years has got no value? Because I've depreciated it, and it's still there and it's still working, and I could sell it. That's another one for the bigger discussions. But I think again, it's this silos, it's the culture. Someone somewhere has gave you a budget. It then kind of comes down to the project teams. Projects are their own project. They don't always talk to the live ops and maintenance team who say, don't buy that thing, or don't do it that way because it's breaking that way. So it's that kind of silo, the data. And again, but I've got a budget. If we need to keep it going for another 20 years, that's someone else's money. So there is a little bit of that. But I think, again, there's some good models and calculations out there that kind of show us, a pound spent today can save, a lot of money. I think, again, with some of the kind of sensor technology, drone technology, rather than just being excited because it's a drone, doing a visual inspection on a tower now and not having to put scaffolding up or a rope access, there is genuinely a cost saving there. And at the end of the day, all you were trying to do was get some eyeballs up to a thing to look at it. So if you can fly a drone up, speed and quality and safety is better. But yeah, this I think it still remains this classic CapEx, OpEx, partly driven by the accountants who, kind of capitalize it or operationalize it. And again, the siloed nature of there's some money, go build me something, don't overspend it. And you've got some time constraints as well.
Yeah, nice.
It's a continuing challenge.
No, good. And good. I like that you started with, like you say, around a government-led project that maybe possibly lost money even, but it's almost not saying they don't care. They don't really care about that, but it's for a bigger project. It's a bigger picture. World Cup, delivering World Cup, first one in the Middle East. So again, it's part of something bigger ultimately, and it had to be in place to support that. So it's a good example that you use there, and maybe where it's less capitalism driven in that example, right, and more sort of for the benefit of the country. And should we say a couple more questions, Adam? Just looking ahead, what are we've got here around what are the biggest opportunities for the industry? I feel like I repeat myself a little bit maybe with some of the questions, but I always remember you posted about AI maybe about 6 months ago, 9 months ago now, and I love the post. I can't remember it verbatim, but you were kind of saying, "Hey, it's not going to be adopted quickly, guys. Let's just relax a little bit here." Has your view on that maybe changed over the last 6-9 months? I suppose with the pace of AI, I feel like I always say the same thing, but AI will always be discussed, I think, in this podcast just because of how much it's been adopted. But and you might have heard Shane Scriven speak about AI. He's like all in, should we say? He's got all chips pushed into AI. What's your view on AI, and what do you see the biggest, separate to that as well, whether it's AI or something else? What are the biggest opportunities for asset management as an industry?
Sure. So let's talk AI. Like you said, you can't do a podcast without AI. No, look, I think again, 5-10 years ago it was big data, machine learning, right? And maybe that's just been rebranded. Before that, it was nanotechnology. It's going to be big. What I see is it's still, although this time around AI is getting a little bit more in the hands of consumers, and you don't have to be a hardcore coder. You can do stuff, but still the language, the terminology deep in the AI world, the models, the nodes, the parameters, the tokens, it's not being translated into the user world. I kind of always joke with my friends, you see one of these NVIDIA presentations where they're talking about petaflops of data transferring and all this, and most people go, yeah, but can I make an animation of a cat dancing? And they're like, yeah. And you went, yeah, okay, cool. I don't care how it works. And that, or if I drop this document in and I ask a question, do I get the answer? Yeah. Okay, cool. You guys work out the processor part.
Yeah.
And the data centers and everything. So I still see it's both the challenge and the opportunity. It's that kind of flip side, isn't it? That, and I'm educating myself on it. I absolutely see some use cases, and there's a lot of discussion around the governance and things like that. But yeah, the challenge I would say is with AI is, and again, AI from dancing cats to, reading a document or producing the so-called AI slop and hallucinations. But I think the rate of change, terminology, processes, and systems is overwhelming.
Yeah.
Like never before.
I agree.
But again, if I was to kind of wax lyrical, and you've given me this opportunity, it's 2026. Some of us have got the latest iPhone, and there's parts of the world where they haven't even got the infrastructure for a Nokia 3210. And whilst we're trying to replace workers with AI, there's people who just want a job. And, the rest of the world has got a lot to catch up with. Like I say, you go to remote parts of South America or throughout Africa, your iPhone's not working. So there's that disconnect between what we're trying to push in the kind of Western world and what infrastructure, jobs, and possibilities. But then, I think regulation is also going to hold us back. Europe, there's that other great saying, America innovates, China imitates, and the EU regulates. And I saw another good quote this morning where someone had posted, the EU has got the best AI laws. And a comment was, that's like bragging about speed limits when you've got no roads. And I just thought, yeah, I think Europe's regulating to slow it down, whilst other parts of the world are trying to, accelerate it. But again, there's a lot of very interesting discussions around investment cycles. 18 months, the chips that you just spent billions on are now worthless, and all these things. But that's AI. So lots of great technology. Again, I've used it to translate training into Arabic when I've delivered it.
Nice.
Yeah, really impactful. I actually took the big picture and translated it into Arabic. Brilliant. And delivered it in Cairo. So yeah, AI, really fast, but it still comes down to the use case and the translation. And the opportunities as asset management, again, I think we really just need to train the next generation, because we've, depends where you are in the world, the age profile. You've got graduates coming in, but people are hesitant to employ. You've got us middle-aged. I think we're middle-aged now. And then you've got the older generation managers who want to retire. So there's knowledge transfer, knowledge gaps, new possibilities, but just, again, making people aware of the frameworks and how we implement asset management. And of course, technology is going to have a big role in that as well.
Yeah, brilliant. No, really good to hear your takes. I think, and some good use cases, like you say there. You've used it in some good cases, but like I say, we've got to support the generations that are coming through with you can't lose that foundational piece. And I really like your reflections as well, right? Like, you get caught in this sort of Western bubble of really accelerating what we're trying to do with AI, and when you actually look at the bigger picture and take a step back almost, maybe like we did with just recently with sending people to the moon, it kind of just gives you that sense of, hey, we're just this. Anyway, I'm getting a bit too deep here, maybe, but it's a good point you mentioned. Is what I said. It's small dot in this big universe. Anyway, it's been quite a stoic podcast. I like it, Adam. It's good. Lots of quotes.
Love a quote.
I do indeed. I do as well. Last question, Adam. Anything else you want to discuss, I suppose, or any points, any other challenges, tensions that you'd like to discuss or speak about?
Really, like I say, I would just stress that, I've been fortunate to travel a lot with the work, train people, deliver projects, learn from great people. Again, I feel very blessed that I'm aware that what I know can help people. There's still so much for me to learn. But what I would stress is you got to keep learning. Whilst you could apply something somewhere, it might not work somewhere else. Really focus on the cultural sensitivities. They say what we think might work in America or Europe doesn't work other places around the world. Be humble to learn from other people. Keep reading. But again, really I think it's really, for me, the speed at which we apply what we already have. Yeah, that would be my thing that I want to share with people. And again, LinkedIn, great community to learn from people. I connected with people who had, training and knowledge, and I was like, I don't know what that was. And then read the body of knowledge and did some training in that. And again, I think the asset management framework it's really a good roadmap for self-development as well. Learn about risks, learn about stakeholders, learn about regulations, different industries, maintenance, data and AI. It's like the fourth bridge. Once you've spent time circling around, each one's developed again, so you kind of learn again. But no, it's anyone listening or not in this industry or community, get involved. People are very friendly. They will, guide and support you. And again, the world needs asset management. We're back to the Stone Age without our assets. But get actively involved, because it's not going away.
Absolutely. No, it certainly isn't. It's only gonna get more complex as time goes on, right? So no, good, Adam. Really good reflections. Last
Thank you.
question. Any guest recommendations, Adam? Any recommendations of who to get on? Anyone that you think could be a good guest?
I mean, I can't say like Trump or the Pope or something.
I could try.
Yeah.
I think he's in
Busy
demand at the minute.
schedule. I think she'd be very interested. So actually, Nicole Robertson. So I can share the details, but she was a speaker on my course at Loughborough University. She's an asset manager at the Grain LNG terminal just outside London. Very knowledgeable, very passionate, very actively involved in managing a critical infrastructure. So she's brilliant. And another good friend, colleague, Tim Kay. So similar to me, works independently as an asset manager, but has also worked, globally. Philippines, has worked for DP World, so shipping and marine harbors, and airports, other infrastructures, and also a very knowledgeable, engaging individual. So there's one of each.
No, fantastic. Thank you very much. Really good to have you on, and wish you all the best with your business, and really good to hear the things you're doing and the very interesting clients that you work with. And thanks very much for coming on, and it's been a real pleasure.
No, thanks for the opportunity, John.
No, thanks very much, Adam. Thank you.